on to the Smart Property Investment Show with your host, Phil Tarrant.
G'day everyone, it's Phil Tarrant here. I'm the host of the Smart Property Investment Show. Thanks for joining us. We're here to talk about property and property investing and what it is to be a property investor. Someone's going to help me out with that today. In the studio, a young bloke who, what I understand from a very short off-air conversation I've had with him, someone who's reasonably early on his property investment journey, but he seems to be making some pretty good headway so far. Curtis Stewart. Curtis, how you going?
Good, thanks, Phil. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I was thinking just before we started talking, and for all of our listeners, if you don't know, these are completely unscripted. So the brief I have on Curtis is that he's a property investor. So it's my job to try and extract some information I think our listeners are going to be valuable about what you're doing, Curtis. So a couple of things I know. You're not old, so you're pretty young. What is it, 27 years old. So
making progress on that too, though.
so relatively new into work, professional life. And you're a mortgage broker and you do that for a living, right? After some other things.
Yeah. So sort of out of uni at 22, went to work for the government down in Canberra, sort of on financial markets and those sort of things for 4 or 5 years. And then, mortgage broking now. So.
Okay. So towards the back end of this chat, we'll talk about getting money at the moment.
Yeah.
But a couple of things I know. You're not that old. You grew up around the Gold Coast way.
Yeah, Gold Coast boy. So Queensland born and bred. And then, high school, uni, everything there. Friends, family there. And then, down to sort of Canberra for work. And then, finally up to the big smoke here for the last couple of years. So
okay, so that's what I know about you, which isn't a lot, which I'm quite happy about because it allows me to sort of explore your journey as a property investor and what you want to do. So what do you reckon is going to be the one bit of information, the one theme, the one gem that we're going to be able to extract from you to help our listeners sort of either change the way they're investing or thinking about investing or just having a check? Yeah,
the one gem for me, I guess, personally, I think the most interesting part of my story is probably the way I started, and got my first investment property. That was down in Canberra a couple of years ago when I was living there, but just sort of entering the market, using a lot of the government grants available, not really having that much, sort of 40 grand or so in savings to throw at it, finding a way to use that to get into the market, I guess.
So this is my job as a journalist to work out where the story is, right? So that's interesting to me. So so the backstory for you starting into the market, starting as a property investor, as a younger person, how did you buy your first property?
Yeah, so I guess I had very little, or no interest in property, but I didn't really have any interest in it until sort of 24 maybe. It wasn't something that crossed my mind in anything more than a fleeting way. And my savings levels were probably never something that I thought could actually be used to buy a house. Sort of you look around and you're like, I have whatever, 30, 40, 50 grand in my account, like useless. But then in Canberra, I had a few friends that were starting to build portfolios and started to really do my research about kind of what was possible and what the different options were for someone entering the market for the first time. And a lot of things like in Canberra, and in a lot of states, they have a first home owners grant, they have stamp duty exemptions, and I was kind of running the numbers. Finance was quite a little bit more easy to get then too, especially at high LVRs. So I was kind of running the numbers and got to the point where it's like, cool, my 40 grand, I don't even need to use it all, and I can go and buy a new apartment in Canberra, something that I can live in for the first 6 months while I'm working there, and that, I can use 20 grand of my 40 grand and I'm in. So it took me a while to actually action that, but I kind of dwelt on that.
Did anyone help you work out the opportunities by that? So let's call it a strategy. So as a first home owner, and it changed all the time, the state on state about what you can buy in order to achieve and receive the grant plus stamp duty exemption. It changed all over the place, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But did anyone help you and say, Curtis, do you know you can do this? Here's a strategy. Do this, buy this, it's brand new, you're going to get first home buyer's grant, you probably get some stamp duty exceptions, and you need to live in it for 6 months before you can turn it into an investment property.
Yeah,
did you work that out?
Not really. I did that myself, but I had some friends that they weren't using the exemptions, but they were looking at their own investment properties. Okay. So it was kind of I don't know if it's keeping up with the Joneses, but it was kind of like they're finding a way to use what they have to move forward in their investing journey, whether it's property or other asset classes, I guess. So I was then kind of did the research to be like, well, how do I use what I have to sort of start climbing up the ladder? And property was, for me at least, property was the answer.
And did you find it easy to find the information you needed in order to be able to go about doing this? Was it easily accessible?
It's all online, but it's not easy to get your head around. They don't, having worked in government for a little bit, I kind of get it now, but they don't present anything in an easy to understand or easy to access way or easy to understand terms. Are you eligible? Are you not eligible? Insert, pages and pages of legal terms that don't make a lot of sense to you to start with. But it was quite long. It probably took me from inception of the idea that, yes, this is possible, to like executing and signing a contract. It was probably almost a 12-month, 9-month gestation period, like in my mind, and then actually going to find something. Yeah.
And did you buy this particular property? And we'll talk about that in a second. But, but I'm talking about the concept here. Did you buy this property on the basis that it would be somewhere that you would live for the long term, and then your circumstances subsequently changed and it turned into a investment property? Or did you buy it for the purpose of it being an investment property, but you had to live in it for 6 months over that first year in order to get the grant?
Yeah, definitely the second one. So if, as it turns out, I ended up moving to Sydney anyway, but even if I lived in Canberra, the initial plan stayed in Canberra. The initial plan was buy it, live in it for the minimum amount of time necessary in order to pass all the criteria, move back out and rent for something less than what it would have been, bring me in rental income.
Okay. So that was a deliberate strategy.
Yeah. So it was kind of a 6-month window in order to access the grants and things, which by the numbers kind of made sense to make that 6 months sacrifice on rent, and basically the mortgage was slightly more than the rental income or the rental expense I was paying, sharing. So it was just a 6-month window where it was like, for the stamp duty exemption and for the 12.5K, like tick, that makes sense to do that for that period.
Okay, which is smart. And a lot of first home buyers use this particular track into property. So depending where you are in Australia, there is different levels of
assistance,
breaks and assistance for first home buyers. So either they'll give you a lump sum, which is a first home owners grant, and then they'll potentially give you some exemptions around stamp duty. Up to a particular point, you might not pay any, and then it'll be a sliding scale after that. So I don't want to go into what happens in every state, because there's plenty of information. If you just go to the Office of State Revenue website in your respective state, that's cool. But what our listeners need to be careful about if you are younger and thinking about this particular strategy is that you've got to play by the rules, because the government takes a very negative light about people who try and exploit this particular initiative that they've put together. So in your case, in Canberra, within the first year, you had to live within the property for a 6-month period. Is that pretty much what
and I ended
it was?
up living in it for a little bit longer. But it was a 6-month period.
Yeah.
And I kind of think I had viewed it as, even though it was my first purchase, and it, by sort of Sydney standards at least, it's not the biggest purchase. I still viewed it as a pretty long-term asset that I intend to hold for quite a long period of time.
And you still have the property?
Yeah.
Okay, let's have a chat about the property. What did you buy? Where was it?
So it's in Wright, it's called, which is a suburb, one of the new suburbs in Canberra in the Molonglo Valley. So it was about 8-minute drive, depending on whether I caught the red light or not, into work.
Okay. Is that in Civic? It was work or?
Just on the other side, so Parks, other side of the bridge. And then, there was a whole bunch of new developments, new land releases, new apartment buildings going up in that area. So ended up buying it for $275 off the plan, which is kind of one of the criteria you need for the stamp duty exemption.
It being a new build.
Yeah, which, has its pros and cons, but in this case, again, the stamp duty exemption kind of tipped, in favour of that direction. So bought it for $275.
And in terms of the tax breaks or stamp duty breaks or the first home owners grant you received, so you got first home owners grant of
12.5. I think. Yep.
Yeah. And you wouldn't have paid no stamp duty.
No stamp duty at that level. Yeah.
So essentially, you got 12.5K
to my deposit.
To your deposit,
which I'm not paying. Yeah.
Okay. And did you finance that at
88%?
Yeah. Plus, did you capitalise?
Yeah, capitalised
LMI.
Yeah.
Right, okay. So 88%. So what was your total deposit? What was your total in? Curtis is picking up his calculator here. He's tapping buttons.
That's the part you try not to remember. My total money down.
What was your total money down? And for our listeners, we're talking about the actual deposit here. So this is the if we borrowed 88%, he needs to find $12,000 in cash. Plus, normally you'd have to pay stamp duty, but you didn't have to pay stamp duty.
So it was about $20K, and then there was sort of legal fees and stuff. So it would have been about $22 all up.
$22,000. So
$22 all said and done.
So $22,000 of your own
cash,
of money needed to go in.
$22 out of my account. Yeah.
Okay. Plus the 12.5.
Yeah, it gets you to your 12% deposit.
Okay. So $22,000. It's manageable, right?
I'm in. Yeah.
You're
and
in.
that I think that was the thing that was really interesting to me, was that I didn't think there was a way to enter, or I didn't realise that there was a way to enter the property market in any sort of meaningful way with that sort of money.
Yeah.
And admittedly, living in Canberra where prices are a bit cheaper was helpful, but yeah, until I really looked into it, that was something that I wouldn't have. If someone had said, "Oh, you have 20K in your account, do you know you can buy a house?" I would have been like, "No," or an apartment.
So 275. When did you purchase?
Start of 2015.
Okay, so two and a half years ago.
Yeah.
And have you had a valuation on the property? What do you think it's worth?
Yeah, well, it's interesting actually. So the bank thinks it's worth a lot more than I do, which is always nice. I reckon it's worth about 330 based on 340 maybe based on other sales. But the lovely people at CBA, they think it's worth 380. So
Okay, so essentially 100 grand of equity gain according to the bank. So
according to the bank,
according to the bank in 2.5 years.
Yeah, I think 340 is probably, if I actually sold it, I think 340 is more what someone would actually pay for it. But it's always nicer when the bank takes a more aggressive position than
It doesn't have
reality.
Yeah. And what's the plan with this? Are you going to keep it?
Yeah, I'm going to keep it. It yields quite well, so like
What's the yield on it?
brings in about 5.5-6%, so it brings in 350 a week.
Okay, is it two better?
No, one and like a little study.
Yeah,
a little study in a little backyard courtyard thing.
And who's in it? Just some like young professional?
Yeah,
young
teacher
government?
at the moment.
Okay.
At a local school there, so. Yeah.
That's cool. So you can pick these up today, do you reckon, on the market for about 340?
Yeah, 340. And there's lots of, like that area, there's lots of new ones being built too. So it's not there's a lot of supply, I guess, in those particular suburbs. So I don't think prices are particularly high, or the pressure isn't too high.
And do you think over time, though, because I spent a lot of time in Canberra and there's a lot of land around Canberra. So,
yeah, there is.
What's going to positively put pressure on this thing to grow in value if they're building places like this all over the joint? What makes you think it's a good long-term investment is the question.
I'm a little bit of a believer in Canberra more generally. I do think, and this is like subsequently, I do think land is going to be more valuable than sort of an apartment in terms of capital growth, which is why my future, like my other two, are land. But I'm little bit of a believer in Canberra. I think it's got really healthy incomes. It's got really stable unemployment, unless the government announces it's going to slash a bunch of jobs, which does happen from time to time. Yeah, I kind of think it's my read on the people and the market there is that there's a lot of owner-occupiers at quite low LVRs. If interest rates went up, I would imagine Canberra would be one of the last places in Australia to be affected by mortgage stress.
It's quite buttressed, yeah.
Yeah, like it's quite a conservative city or town, I guess, with a lot of capital and a lot of wealth, and a fairly high income. So I think like going forward, the population there has the capacity to pay for the prices and the rent. And yes, there's a lot of land available, which puts, downward pressure on prices through increased supply. But I think that demand side, the other side of the equation, is quite healthy in Canberra and sustainable as well, which is where I look at some other places. I do wonder how sustainable the demand is.
Yeah, we've written a lot about Canberra on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. You go and check it out. Just go to the search button and put in Canberra. We've had a lot of different people offer commentary around it, and a lot of people are reasonably bullish about Canberra. For some of the indicators that you've pointed out, it's a very livable city. There's a talk about, which they've been talking about for years, about this fast train from Sydney, and if that gets in place, that's really going to change things. And I know people who are land banking across from
that corridor,
down through Goulburn on the pretense that at some point in time it will happen, and what will happen then is that people are going to really have tree change type opportunities in that they can actually commute into Canberra or Sydney. From
Goulburn.
Goulburn to Canberra is not very far. It's a bit of a hassle.
Hour drive.
It's an hour drive, but there's some people are doing the commute every day up and down the freeway.
Definitely.
But it's going to change the world. So and
it's got I also am a bit of a believer in especially on the demand side, where there's jobs and job creation and good job prospects, that kind of underpins that and supports it. And Canberra's got I would say a fairly robust job market. It's government's the employer, highly educated population. So there's kind of some upsides I see there.
So this was your leapfrog, your first foray
into the water.
So subsequent to your Canberra purchase, there's a couple more in your portfolio. So you've moved on?
So I've been buying land in Western Melbourne. So I've got 2 plots of land in Western Melbourne that I'm looking to, they haven't quite settled yet, but I'm looking to build on when they settle. So
you've got an option to buy the land, or?
Oh, no, I've already bought it.
You've bought it, okay.
But it hasn't, the titles haven't they register in the next few months. So
Yeah.
the titles, you can't build on them yet because they haven't.
Okay.
Like the titles haven't registered.
So is this
yet.
part of a new development?
Yeah, new
okay.
land release,
Yeah.
which there is a fair bit of that going on in sort of the outer Melbourne suburbs as well.
Are these blocks side by side or two blocks within the same
No,
area?
two blocks in different, like within 10 k's of each other, but
Okay.
in different developments.
Don't you think it's quite risky to go two blocks of land that you're going to build on simultaneously, or are you going to do
Yeah,
it?
so the cash, like I've mapped out my cash buffers like pretty carefully to make sure that I can sustain that build, or both builds, I guess.
Are you going to do them at the same time?
Probably, yeah. But I also made sure, and this was the tricky part and why they're not side by side, is that I made sure that I negotiated like an on-sell clause, which I found surprisingly hard to do, to make sure that if I, for whatever reason, I need to get out, or I can't complete, or I can't do the build, that I can sell the land. The
Okay.
land on. So I've got
What'd you pay for the land?
$210 for both. Yeah.
Okay.
For 405 square meters.
And what are you going to put on it, like 4-bedders?
Yeah, 4 better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And you've chosen design, you've done all that stuff yet?
Yeah. So not quite finalised, but pretty much, yeah. So
Do you enjoy doing that part of the process? What asset I'm going to build on this block of land, or is it?
I
are you
enjoy
being
doing.
quite detached about it.
I enjoy doing the what asset do I want to build? What are the returns? What are the numbers? The actual like what taps do you want? That part I don't really enjoy so much.
Yeah. So how are you making sure that you build the best product you can, but ensuring you spend as little as possible on it? So rather than putting stone benches in, are you putting in laminate, because there's going to be investment properties, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm definitely not going top of the line, but I do have some, like I've spoken to a lot of people and done a lot of research. I've got some, friends that have built and some friends that are in that industry to sort of be like, look, what's the middle ground in terms of I don't want something that's going to fall apart, and because again, I intend to own them for a long period of time. Like I don't just want to kick the can down the road, but I'm also not looking to live there. So if there's an extra 5k here and there for the enjoyment of, or the person living there, if it's marginal, then I don't need to spend that money.
Okay. So you're going to build these simultaneously. Have you found a builder yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you find the builder?
Again, sort of.
Someone you know?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And,
Sort of,
a lot of internet searching and chatting to a lot of people. So I, probably, I don't know how many hours I've spent on the phones to various builders trying to suss out what they're doing.
Is it a big builder? Like, is it a big builder of like project homes and stuff?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
They seem to have the cheapest, like they kind of do them out of the box.
Yeah.
And they have the cheapest prices. So.
Are you putting the same property on both blocks of land, like the same build?
Yeah.
So it's going to be identical?
Yeah.
Okay, so you should...
Yeah. So they're either both good or both bad.
Yeah. Are they flat blocks or are they...
Yeah, they're flat blocks.
So it's just put a slab on it.
Should be pretty
chuck it up.
straightforward is the plan anyway. But you never know.
So this will be property 2 and 3.
2 and 3, yeah.
So is there any particular reason why you've chosen to go down buy a block of land and build it rather than get yourself something established?
Yeah, partly to allow me a little bit of additional time to build the cash buffers, because obviously in the 9-month window between me committing to purchase or purchasing the land and it settling and the build starting, it gave me a bit of a window to sort of tighten belts and ensure that I had the cash buffers there.
Okay.
And I want the depreciation benefits too. I see some upside there, on the new builds. So
the world's changed a lot for property investors after the budget announcement and subsequent information coming through from government that only on new build properties can you actually get plant equipment depreciation.
Yeah,
whereas if you buy something established, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
there is depreciation benefits, which will help with a tax outcome once you do all your tax around it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was also that, and it was also partly a new sort of challenge as well, I guess, that I wanted to take on. I guess not necessarily that I will be looking to do lots and lots and lots of builds in the future, but it's an aspect of property investing that I want to know about and I want to have experienced, at least for whether it's for better or worse. So I can add that into my sort of bank of skills and options.
What are you going to do when it all goes wrong and the builders don't turn up on site? And you're based in Sydney, aren't you?
Yeah.
So down in Melbourne.
So my parents are down in Melbourne, luckily, so I might have to get them to help out.
So they're going to keep an eye on things, are they?
Yeah, they're going to keep an eye on things.
Have you seen the blocks yet? Have you actually stood on them and gone, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I've stood on them. They're not that exciting, to be honest.
It's a bit of dirt.
Yeah, it's a bit different to sort of buying the first one that was apartment. You can, even though it wasn't built then, but you go into the mock-up one they have and you're like, oh, yep. And then when you go out to the new land release, you're just like, yep, that's a paddock of land.
So where is the land?
Wyndham Vale, which is like Werribee.
Okay.
So out that way.
Yeah.
On the, what's it called? The V line. Up from Geelong, there's a station there. So.
Okay. Why did you choose to buy land in those areas or that area?
Yeah, so I guess my investment decision was after getting the apartment, I wanted to switch to something with land content, which doesn't necessarily mean new, but I was sort of for my portfolio. And going forward, I think lands, in terms of capital appreciation, kind of try and think Australia in 50 years, land is going to be more scarce. Melbourne has, like a bit like Canberra, has some capacity to release more
Plenty
land.
of space around Melbourne.
Yeah. But, if you double the population and you take that really long view, like I think that's going to be the better outcome over the long term versus an apartment. So that was kind of where I started with, was I want land or land content. And then I was doing a lot of research about where I thought sort of the growth areas in terms of jobs and population growth in Australia. Had a bit of a budget constraint too, which pretty much ruled Sydney out. But the rest of Australia was still an option. And that Western Melbourne corridor seems to have a lot of, the projections are, at least, that there's going to be a lot of population growth to Melbourne. And a lot of that's going to go there. Melbourne, the government are putting a lot of new infrastructure in, new trains running that way. Werribee's sort of getting a new technology centre, and it seems like an area that to me at least, over the next 30 years is going to change a lot, and it's going to look very different. And that was sort of why I ended up there.
I had a chat with Bernard, so I don't know if you listened to the
Yeah,
podcast.
I'm actually a pretty big fan of his.
He's a smart bloke.
Yeah.
About a month ago, so for our listeners, go and listen to it. It's pretty... Did we speak about Werribee?
No,
about
Sunshine.
Sunshine, okay.
Yeah.
He's quite bullish about population growth in Melbourne.
Yeah.
In the decades ahead.
And I kind of think too that if you're... to me, the fundamentals that are different between Sydney and Melbourne, where you go, okay, if you go out to the outer suburbs of Sydney and you want to buy a 400 square metre block with a house on it, it's going to be nearly double what you pay in Melbourne. Part of that does make a little bit of sense to me. Sydney, the capacity to release new land in Sydney is a lot less, but it doesn't make sense to me that it's that different. Like, they're going to be cities that have relatively similar populations. I think Melbourne's projected to pass Sydney, but whether that happens...
Well, it's still the same distance into town as well,
yeah,
right? From Werribee to Flinders Street, how long will that take?
35 minutes on the train.
It's a lot closer.
Yeah.
If you're buying out in... So new releases in Sydney are out towards...
Like Gregory Hills way.
Yeah, or out towards the back of the ponds now, Rouse Hill way. It's a long way. They're putting a new train line in, to be fair, but it's still going to be an hour.
Yeah.
So,
like, I kind of think they're relatively comparable cities. Like, they've got big populations, they've got big job centres, big CBDs. No offence to the other cities in Australia, but they're kind of they're the two big ones. So to me, the fact that I can go to Western Melbourne and get something done or get two done versus I can't go anywhere in Sydney. I was like, I think like over the next 30 years, that gap's more likely to close than widen, which who knows?
So you need a good crystal ball, but you got to base it on going back to the sort of Bernard Salt podcast. These what do they call them? Pistons. These big
job centres.
Job centres. These pistons that drive the economy forward. And okay, cool. So why are you investing in property? What's the purpose? You're a young bloke.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this?
I often wonder myself, I guess. But I think I probably have less finite goals than a lot of people who have, I want 10 properties or I want a net asset position of X dollars by this day, this month. Mine's more, I'm at a pretty good situation in my life. I've had a really good childhood, good education. I've kind of live in a great country, kind of had for the human population, I've had pretty much every lucky break you could want. At my age, it's just what am I doing to make sure that when I get married, have kids, when I'm older, that I'm in a financial position that's taken advantage of the good kind of run I've had for the first 25 years of my life. So the goal was more, okay, what am I doing now to position myself better? So in 20 years' time, I've got a really healthy financial position. And I guess to drill down a bit more, I'm thinking cash flow too. So I want to be able to have, if I don't need to work, I don't need to work, or if my income's supplemented by the cash flow returns from property, that's kind of what I'm looking at.
Okay.
And that was the motivation, I guess, still is.
Okay. I guess in terms of goal setting, your goals will change over time the more you do with this. But
Yeah, and I have some rough kind of net asset goals. So it's like, all right, once these are done, I'm going to have, about $1.4 million worth of property at around about an 80% LVR, hopefully. So it's like, okay, that's sort of position as at end of 27, by end of 30, be looking at hopefully, all right, can I get to 1.75 million would probably be the goal, maybe 2, and then sort of just step it up from there. But
do you sort of think about goal setting that much, or is just, that it'll probably sort itself out?
I do, but I don't go drill too down into the finite numbers. It's more, do I feel that given what I have, I'm using it to my best advantage? So it's a bit like when I had that 40 grand there, it was sitting there for, I probably had that level of savings for 3-4 years before I ever did anything
probably
with it.
getting about 1.5% interest on
savings. And it's kind of dawned on me. It's like, no, I'm not doing the best I can with what I have to move forward. Like, let's find a better solution.
So you got some savings now, which you're going to use to help underwrite the cost of
the build, and I've already put some the money down for the land. So
so you're a mortgage broker. So let's have a quick chat about finance. So this savings that you have got it offsetting some debt somewhere, or is it just sitting in a savings account?
Yeah, well, it is offsetting debt, but it's an equity release, so it's debt that wasn't there anyway. So
all right.
So it's the equity release from Canberra with, like I said, the relatively favourable valuation that allowed me to.
So the Commonwealth Bank valued it up at 380, and you went, sure, I'll take it.
That sounds really good. If you're happy to lend to me based on 380, I'm also, if you want to buy it for 380, I'll also sell it to you.
One of the beautiful things about property is that you share the risk with people who are obviously a lot smarter than you. So the Commonwealth Bank in this case, own a big chunk of the property through the debt they've given you so they've got that level of confidence. Let's say our banks are pretty good, to be fair, compared to global banks. Held us in pretty good stead over the global financial crisis, and banks are risk averse.
Exactly. And they've got a 20% stake in it. If they way overvalue it, and for whatever reason I go bust and don't pay, if they've overvalued it by more than 20%, then their capacity to even get their loan backs, get their money back's questionable. So they're pretty conservative. They don't want to put themselves in a ridiculous position.
They've got a real responsibility to. Banks don't like to see borrowers go bust. Banks don't want to end up in a position where they're repossessed. That's the last thing they want. So anyway, equity relation is good. So are you finding it easy to get money yourself now, based on serviceability and
So my position's still relatively strong. I think once these two get done, I'm going to have to start getting a bit more creative. But I've definitely noticed over the last 12 months, but 6 months especially, the credit environment's changed. Banks are. If they haven't explicitly changed their policies, they're tightening up the way they apply it. So I think it's kind of a new world, at least I'd say.
Okay. So you enjoy being a property investor?
Yeah, I do. It's not something that was kind of a lifelong dream or something I really thought about until my kind of early mid-20s. But I really like what it does for me. I like the numbers, which I guess when they're working for you, everyone likes the numbers.
What sort of degree did you do?
Finance and economics.
All right, well, there you go.
So I like the numbers anyway, I guess. Yeah. But I like the leverage too. If you're taking at the start of your, kind of what I'm doing, if you're taking something, a relatively small amount at the start of your life, and you go into some investment asset with a really low capacity to leverage, your ability to turn that into something bigger is, much smaller if it grows. Property is a bit unique that you go to 80% LVRs, you go to 90% LVRs, you can still do it. If you buy a classic car or, a painting or something, you can do it, but your capacity to leverage is not there.
Yeah. All right. Good, Curtis.
Cool. Kicking along, I guess.
Kicking along. That's what you got to do. Give it a go.
Yeah, yes.
Do you spend a lot of time doing it? Is this what you do on the weekends? Or
Yeah, it is now. So, just, I don't know what my time spent on realestate.com and domain are, but I'm sure they'd be through the roof.
I'm sure they're happy about that.
Even stuff I don't have the capacity to do yet, looking at, in Sydney there's a lot of, development corridors and rezoning going on. I don't really have the capacity to go into that market at this stage, but it's still something I follow, just to see what's happening, how prices move when announcements get made.
Got to keep your finger on the pulse.
Yeah, and I think it all gets stored, and then even if you don't use it for 10 years, down the line, you're like, oh, I've seen I was there when this happened last time, and I've got a little bit of information.
Let's go back to the chat I had with Bernard Salt. He spoke about numbers are numbers, but it's the narrative behind the numbers. So if you can pull in all this information over time, and it helps you form a long-term vision and a story behind why things are happening and why markets are changing. So the time you spent now investing in what's going on, even though you might not do anything, in 10 years' time, you're going to be able to revert back to it. It's going to help the narrative to help tell a story, to allow you to be a better property investor. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I kind of believe in that the more you learn, even if you don't use it straight away, like it all adds up, and comes to fruition eventually. It's a bit like, if I buy in a Perth rezoning corridor in 15 years and I'm like, cool, there's an announcement, why haven't prices adjusted? I'm like, I remember, in Sydney when this happened and this is how it played out. So I'm, going in with a little bit more information than if I was just not paying attention.
Cool. All right. Thanks, mate. Really enjoy the chat.
Thanks.
Keep it up.
Appreciate it.
After you get these two places built, let's get you back on and you can tell me about all the
troubles
nights you've had.
Yeah. I'll give you all the horror stories.
Most people building one have headaches, so if you're going to go two at the same time, be prepared.
Yeah, they might. Maybe they're the last two builds I'll do. Hey?
Maybe, you never know. Get some scar tissue around. There's nothing wrong with that. But as you said, it's a good experience to go through.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, no, appreciate you coming in. If you've got any questions for Curtis or about any of the stuff we spoke about today, including first-time owners grants or stamp duty exemptions, we've got lots of it online. But email the team, editor@smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Just go and search those terms on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au and you'll get a whole bunch of stuff. Remember, go to the OSR site, so Office of State Revenue in each of the respective states where you're buying, and you can see what their conditions are around about if you're a first-home buyer. And be careful, make sure you stay within the rules. If you're not yet subscribing to our daily market intelligence, be the first to know what's happening in property in Australia, smartpropertyinvestment.com.au/subscribe. Remember, on all the social channels, just search Smart Property HQ if that's how you like to receive your information. And those 5-star reviews on iTunes, please keep them coming. We do appreciate them. We'll be back again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.